What associations do you personally have when you hear the name Hollywood? Probably the red carpet during the Oscars, the Academy Awards events, the actors, and the studious. Maybe you even think of the green hills, the palms, the sunny weather, and the big villas of celebrities. Most likely, most of us will immediately remember the famous letters that form the word Hollywood. Indeed, Hollywood is the place that gathers some of the most famous people we see on our screens every day. This is where hundreds of thousands of kilometers of film are shot every year. And what comes of it are the famous films, TV series, as well as the best shows. It seems that life is completely different in Hollywood. And this is true. Everyone knows what Hollywood is. And thousands of young people go there every year in search of a movie career, which, alas, only a few succeed in. But have you ever wondered how this particular place became the center of the US film industry? And why exactly did Hollywood become Hollywood? How was it decided exactly that this place would become the center of the American and even the world's cinema industry? It is difficult to answer this question. Then you should definitely watch this video. But before we talk about the history of the emergence of Hollywood itself, it is worth dwelling a little on the biography of Hobart Johnstone Whitley. He was a Canadian-American developer, and he is the one they call the father of Hollywood. Hobart was born on the 7th of October, 1847, in Toronto, Canada. He was the seventh and youngest son of Joseph Wheatley and Eleanor Johnstone. The family had an above-average income, and later, Hobart graduated from Toronto Business College. In 1870, he became an American citizen. At the age of 23, Wheatley moved to Chicago. He became the owner of a small candy store and a household appliances store. But Hobart himself was more interested in banking and land management. This became his path of life because a few years later, he was elected by the board of directors of the Chicago Rock Island Railroad Company. At that moment, he was already 35, and in the spring of 1986, Hobart married Margaret Virginia Wheatley. This marriage can be called the beginning of Hollywood, as after their marriage, the couple traveled to California on their honeymoon. This was the first time Hobart saw Los Angeles and its suburbs, one of which was Hollywood. Back then, Hollywood consisted of scattered farms and orchards. Hobart was impressed by the sunny weather and the beautiful landscape of the area, which did not leave him indifferent. But, after a brief vacation in California, at that time, Hobart returned to his passion for land development in the center of the USA. During the construction of the border railroads towards the west in the late 1870s up until the early 1890s, he founded many towns in the territory of Oklahoma, Dakota, Texas, and California. It is estimated that Whitley founded more than 140 towns in his lifetime. Some of those towns have now grown to millions of people. While working in Oklahoma, Hobart was the first to get access to previously unallocated land in Oklahoma. There, he laid the first brick of the very first building to be constructed in the state and asked permission from local residents to become its first governor. Wheatley also went to the U.S. Congress to approve the city of Guthrie as the capital of the state. But in addition to developing the land, Wheatley also became the president of National Loan and Trust Company in Guthrie, a vice president of Home Savings Bank, president of First National Bank of Van Nuys, State Bank of Owensmouth, and Bank of Lancashire. In addition, Hubbard donated large plots of land for civil use. His donations were used to fund public schools, libraries, parks, streets, transportation, and churches, covering these charges. So, in general, we can say that after earning a lot of money, he did not forget about the people who supported him and was preoccupied with building the communities and towns. Whitley came to California in 1893. The reason for the move was his suffering a nervous breakdown back east. Shortly after arriving in California, Whitley agreed to purchase 480 acres from E.C. Hurd for $22,000. They sealed the deal with a handshake. As he purchased land, Whitley supplemented his income by opening a jewelry store in downtown Los Angeles. The H.J. Whitley Company, which, according to the Los Angeles Herald, was the finest of its kind in up-to-date furnishings west of Chicago, advertised in newspapers across the Southwest. As the 20th century began, Whitley dedicated himself to transforming Hollywood from a semi-rural settlement of fewer than 1,000 people into a grand suburb. Where there currently was nothing but farms, Whitley envisioned Hollywood as a thriving suburb of Los Angeles. As a side note for those interested in the Hollywood name background, the most likely theory points to the lush holly trees widespread in the area. There were so many trees that it seemed like an impenetrable forest, and that's how the two words were put together, and the name Hollywood saw its birth. Back to our story. In 1901, H.J. Whitley formed the Los Angeles Pacific Boulevard and Development Company. He became its founding president and general manager. His partners were his fellow developer Harry Chandler, streetcar operator Moses Sherman, and his old-time friend, Los Angeles Times publisher Harrison Gray Otis. Whitley and his fellow promoters pushed successfully for infrastructure improvements, including electric streetcar service, full water service, and the construction of Sunset Boulevard, which would provide a stronger connection to Los Angeles. The company subdivided 400 acres of open fields and gardens into a residential section, and more families came here to live. By the beginning of the 1990s, a post office, a hotel, and even 2 markets were already functioning on the territory of the new town. The population was only 500 people. By the way, Los Angeles was 16 kilometers away, and it seemed that it would take no time to travel to. But we should realize that the cars only started to appear at that time, so you would need to travel by horse carriage. Also, the roads passed through citrus groves, as well as around an old citrus packing plant. So, in reality, the road took more than 2 hours. The company's development was centered around Prospect Avenue, today's Hollywood Boulevard, and Highland Avenue, where it built a bank and the original Hollywood Hotel. It was designed by architects Dennis and Farwell. The architects promised to include a rotunda, grand staircase, children's dining room, barber shop, ice station, self-contained power plant, and stunning, therapeutic grounds. Construction was completed in February 1903. Its most popular feature would be its deep, wraparound porch, which would become the hotel's social center for decades, housing such notables as Rudolph Valentino, successful songwriter Carrie Jacobs Bond, and budding moguls like Louis B. Mayer and Carl Laemmle. In the same year, the company opened the first residential area called Hollywood Ocean View Tract. The developer has done a lot. To promote the area, they paid thousands of dollars for electric lighting, including electricity and a bank, as well as a road to the pass. But essential events in the city's history were just around the corner. Already in 1903, Hollywood was registered as a municipality. From that moment on, the city had its own rules. This was the case up until 1910, when the northern and eastern parts of the neighborhood were consolidated with the city of Los Angeles, with Hollywood incorporated into Los Angeles. This was done to provide the young and promising town of Hollywood with an adequate water supply and an improved sewerage system. While all this is very nice, you must be asking when Hollywood became the center of the US cinema. Nothing would connect this place with the cinema if it weren't for what happened next. In the fall of 1911, Whitley and his wife were investigating ways to help Hollywood grow. A newspaper article caught Hobart's eyes. It stated that the movie industry was looking for a new home. And Hobart thought right away that Hollywood would be the perfect spot. Whitley invited David Horsley and Al Christie, 2 famous motion picture entrepreneurs of that time, to come to Hollywood and stay at the Hollywood Hotel. Very quickly, David and Al founded California-based Nestor Film Company, and already on October 26, 1911, Nestor Studios made their first movie at the Whitley Estate on Whitley Avenue and Hollywood Boulevard. Nestor Studios later merged with its distributor, the Universal Film Manufacturing Company, to become Universal Studios. The reason for such interest of filmmaking entrepreneurs and companies to settle in California, a place very distant from the business and population centers of the US East, is quite interesting. And the reason for such a shift to Hollywood is actually just one person, or rather, his cutthroat business style, which left filmmakers only one option: escape the reach of his grasp. The name of the person was Thomas Edison. At that time, indeed, it made sense for most of the filmmakers to settle in the East. The center of the filmmaking industry was located in New Jersey at that time. This was the place for the most famous film companies of that time. It was Edison who patented the kinetoscope movie viewer in 1891, which actually was developed by one of his assistants, William Kennedy Dixon. As a result of the invention of the kinetoscope movie projector and the kinetograph movie camera, Edison opened America's first movie studio, Black Maria. With Edison's studio beginning to pump out the first silent movies in history, competition began to grow, causing him to react accordingly. Edison used what he is often most known for to deter competition, using patents. Edison formed an alliance with other major patent holders in the industry. It was known as the Motion Picture Patents Company. Given how many patents the cartel covered, it was virtually impossible for any independent movie studio to make a film without being bombarded by copyright infringement lawsuits from the MPPS. 289 legal complaints were directed at Universal Studios alone. Any movie being made at the time had to go through Edison, making him the king of the movie industry. Edison's intimidation techniques even wandered outside the law on some occasions, according to Stephen Bach's book, Final Cut. Edison's company would hire mobsters to rough up filmmakers who were violating their patents. The East Coast became suffocating for non-Edison affiliated filmmakers. Every turn they made in the industry was met with a lawsuit, stifling creativity and stalling innovation. The environment that Edison concocted led to independent filmmakers wanting to get far away from him and his monopoly. Hollywood seemed like the ideal destination. Out west, judges were much less tied up in Edison's oppressive patent apparatus and were much more likely to rule with the independents than with the conglomerate. Even in instances where Southern California judges ruled with Edison, their rulings were hard to enforce, given that cross-country travel was long and expensive. So, this rebellion by independent filmmakers against Edison's monopoly presented an opportunity. The opportunity that Hobart Johnstone Whitley used to his advantage. As for Edison, his monopoly was busted by the Sherman Antitrust Act. The ruling made it so that Hollywood could now legally flourish without any threats of lawsuits or mob attacks. Edison, much to his own dismay, was probably the second biggest individual influence on Hollywood after Whitley. Without his cutthroat and eventually illegal business practices, there is a good chance that West Orange in New Jersey would still be home to the film industry and that Hollywood would just be another town outside of Los Angeles. But the short 4 years from the moment Whitley invited David Horsley and Al Christie to the end of Edison's monopoly in 1915 was enough for Hollywood to become such a place where one could create independently. Hollywood was like a bastion of resistance. Everyone knew that this place had its own rules and independent cinema could develop there. The film industry burst into Hollywood rapidly and quickly because everyone who came to Los Angeles admitted that this was an ideal territory for creativity. The Plain Mountains, always sunny weather, low land prices, and abundant workforce. All this made the suburbs of Los Angeles, namely Hollywood, a great place to build cinema enterprises. Whitley himself only contributed to this, without raising the price of land and creating favorable conditions for visitors. And his efforts to bring cinema to Hollywood soon paid off. The first director to make a movie on the territory of Hollywood was David Wark Griffith. His short film called In Old California was the first ever film shot in Hollywood. Gradually, new film companies opened in the city, including Paramount, Warner Brothers, and Columbia. In 1914, the first full-length feature film was released on cinema screens, entirely filmed from a film created in Hollywood. The film was called The Squaw Man, a silent western film directed by Cecil DeMille and Oscar Apfel and starring Dustin Farnham. There is an interesting story behind the world-famous Hollywood sign. The original sign was erected in 1923, and it was not more than a real estate commercial. The sign originally read Hollywood Land and was erected to promote the name of a new housing development in the hills above the Hollywood district of Los Angeles. It was only in 1944 when the Hollywood sign was quietly transferred to the property of Los Angeles, and in 1949, the sign lost the landward. At the beginning of 1920, Hollywood cinema became one of the 5 most popular industries in the country. But obviously, the story of Hollywood does not stop there. In 1929, the first Academy Awards took place in the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel. It consisted of a private dinner with 36 banquet tables, which 270 people attended, and tickets cost $5, which is equivalent to $85 today. The ceremony ran for 15 minutes, which is a stark difference from the 3.5 hours the ceremony ran in 2023. Since then, the awards have changed many places across Hollywood, but it was only until 1953 that the Oscars aired on TV. For the first time in history, a television audience estimated at 40 million persons will watch the movie industry's biggest show. Since then, Hollywood and its movies have continued to grow the dominating role over the minds. Having grown into a mass conglomerate, Hollywood started to play an essential role in pushing the right messages. The main turning point happened around the Second World War when the movie industry, previously far from political statements, had to get involved in supporting the US military in Europe and the war against Japan. At that time, not only Hollywood actors but also the directors themselves took a more pronounced political position. So, for example, in 1940, one of the most famous films directed by Charlie Chaplin, The Great Dictator, was released, where the personality of Adolf Hitler and the ideology of the Third Reich were actively ridiculed. Even Walt Disney Studios, also located in Hollywood, produced propaganda cartoons. The end of World War II brought another opportunity for Hollywood that it actively pursued. The destroyed cities and industries of Europe, the lack of political stability, and the hard work to restore the economy required people to have some escape after the difficult working day. This helped Hollywood to enter new markets during and after World War II. Many filmmakers who were already successful in their homeland in Europe immigrated or simply moved to the United States to work. Hollywood was considered the place where talent from all over the world was concentrated. This further strengthened Hollywood cinema as a globally consumed product. With that, over the course of the next 20 to 30 years, Hollywood transformed from being just a place to become really a massive global brand name with consumers of its products across the world. Hollywood continued to grow in terms of the money it was making every year with its movies, but also its power. From that time, Hollywood actors began to gain fame. World celebrities began to become famous as the movie attracted millions of viewers. The public watched with great interest everything that was happening around their idols. Scandals attracted especially great attention to movie stars. Having really appreciated the role of advertising of this kind, Hollywood strategies began to churn out scandalous stories of Hollywood stars, stirring up public interest in them. In the past couple of decades, the power over the minds of people across the globe started to put a bigger shadow over the very original free spirit of Hollywood, the excitement and creativity of small independent companies that first arrived there. More frequently, cinema, its directors, and actors started to try to use that imaginary power over people's minds to deliver messages and change the ways people should think. With that, Hollywood seems to be losing its free spirit and creativity of the true artists. Is this the sign of a long-term stagnation, or will Hollywood find again that free spirit of making movies for the sake of expressing one's creativity? We will have to see. The history of Hollywood is multifaceted and quite powerful to give it maybe a new momentum. A momentum like the one in 1911 when one man envisioned and built Hollywood as the center of the US movie industry. So, this was the fascinating story of Hollywood growing from farmland to the center of the American and world cinema industry. And what about you? Do you think Hollywood has lost its way in the past few years? Do you feel that Hollywood has become too distant from the true spirit of artists and creators? Maybe you work for the industry and know the inside of it. In any case, let us know your thoughts about Hollywood. Write about it in the comments, but for today, perhaps, this is all. I hope the video was interesting and informative for you. Rate it, and see you soon.